Dale will tell you how we're going to get started here today. I appreciate that we got a good turnout here, and I hope that everybody can stick around for our board meeting, because I want to talk about our regional event that's coming up here, and we're going to need everybody's participation and support for that. So with that, Dale Robineau, the owner of Inspec, and crazy Corvette collector.
While you're here, enjoy to look around and take a look and see what we're doing. We're going to have lunch here. The food's in. I don't know how many of you got to the lunchroom, but there's coffee in there and the sandwiches, etc. And the one thing we are doing, I think, a little different here is we're really going to test Jeff to see how exciting his presentation is. So we're going to eat first, fatten you up, and then we'll see how many people fall asleep. So, anyway, enjoy, look around, and that's it.
We've got a really special program today. Jeff Salz is going to talk to us about headlights. He's going to, as always, have a very informative talk. So without dragging this on any further, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff to present that, and then when Jeff gets done, we'll talk a little bit more about the upcoming program.
Well, thank you very much. And with that big buildup I got earlier from Warner, I feel like cough medicine or Brussels sprouts. Two things you want to get over with. Well, it won't be that bad. And it'll be over within an hour and a half, so don't worry about it. No. Anyway, what we'll talk about today is Corvette headlights specifically, but I want to give you a little bit of background on some history, then we'll do Corvette applications, and then I'll show you some examples, and then some things on date coding, and maybe if we have a little time, show you what happens when these bulbs go bad, and I'll explain what happens to them. But the first thing, let me talk a little bit about early history. The earliest electric headlights, after the acetylene headlights went away very early on, the earliest electric headlights were battery operated. They ran on their own system. They had a separate battery. The driver had to turn it on, and they ran off that battery. It was completely separate from the regular ignition system. The first integrated system was by Cadillac, again, one of the leaders in technology on a lot of things, especially electrical stuff. Cadillac, Delco Electric Lighting, they integrated the system so that the headlights and the ignition system all worked together. In 1928, Guy Lamp, who manufactured all the headlights, they were purchased by GM. I don't know actually when they started supplying General Motors. I know they did Buick and some others, but in 1928, General Motors bought them. One of the interesting things is the dimming of headlights to brights. Originally, the driver needed to exit the car, adjust the headlight so it was a high beam, and then when he got into a more popular area, he had to stop the car, get out, and adjust it down to a low beam, as we'd call it today. In 1915, Guide came out with a dimmable system, but it was not it was not operable from inside the car. You had to still get out to do it. In 1917, again, Cadillac, they introduced the first lever-operated dimmer system that worked from inside the car, so you didn't have to get out to change it. Some of the later ones, some of the headlights in the 30s from Packard and some others were dimmable in three separate dimming settings, one for country, one for suburban, or whatever they called it, and one for the city. Then later, it was standardized in all headlights, a high and a low beam. Originally, of course, we all know that headlights had a removable bulb. You removed the lens, and you put the bulb in, and you put the lens back on. In 1940, one of the very, very first regulations from the federal government, there was hardly anything regulated on automobiles, but one of the very first ones was headlights. They had to be sealed beams. You no longer could replace the bulb. What goes around comes around, of course, because in the 1990s, we started getting headlights where you took the bulb out and you put it in. So it goes around, comes around. But in 1940, all beams had to be sealed beams. The first quad light system was shown for the first time in 1955 at the GM Motorama. It was on a 1955, it was on a concept car, an Eldorado Brougham, Cadillac Eldorado Brougham concept car. That's a picture, that's it right there. They were 5 3/4 inch, and just as they are today, but they were illegal, so they weren't produced. Finally, in 1957, the first two cars to have quad headlights were the Cadillac Eldorado again and the Nash. Other cars in 57, Virgil Exner's designs for the 57 Plymouths and Dodges and Chryslers had a look of a quad headlight. They weren't, but they had the shape of it. They had a headlight in one part, but they still had to have the 7-inch headlight because that was still federal law. But in 1957, the federal government decided that quad headlights, 5 3/4-inch headlights, were to be legal. Many states, they weren't. And so it was technically illegal to sell the Cadillac and the Nash in all 50 states. Still illegal in states until 58, and in 1958, the industry accepted, and in all 50 states used it. And all the guide headlamps were made in Anderson, Indiana. Rectangular headlights came in 1974. They became legal. They were also, the federal government regulated this stuff, and in 1974, they allowed rectangular headlights. And in 1968, I'll back up a second, in 1968, the government said that nothing can cover a headlight. Glass, nothing can be in front of a headlight when it's on. When it's off, you can do whatever you want, but when it's on, nothing can cover it. And as you know, for instance, the Jaguar XKE, in 1968, the glass cover that was on it was removed. You can see that's different. Nothing could be in front of a headlight when it was on. And so that brings us up to Corvette Applications. Well, from 1940 on, the very first seal beam headlights were Steelbacks. This is an example. This is Dale's here. This is an example of a Steelback headlight. You can see that the problem, what happened was why there's so few around, you can't find them, is because steel, it just rusted like everything else. And this rusted away and the headlight was then just no good. That was used on Corvettes, 53 and 54, 6 volts, and some very early 55, 12 volts. There's the front, just a plain front. The only thing that's on it's a seal beam at the bottom, and then at the very top, the word top. But there's nothing else, nothing else in the middle of the bulb, no markings at all. The introduction to T3, the modern headlights in right traffic countries, United States and wherever, when you drive on the right-hand side, the headlights are by design built to tilt slightly down and slightly to the right. In the left countries like England, Australia, I think Japan, whatever, they're tilting down slightly and tilting to the left, so they don't shoot into the oncoming traffic if they're adjusted properly. Well, Guide decided, let's use that in our marketing. And so they decided to call it the T3, which means tilted 3 degrees. That's what they decided, how they decided to market it. And the T3s were introduced in Corvette anyway, and probably in the rest of General Motors that used this, in 1956. There was also a T350. I've had some, and it's underneath the triangle it says 50. And what that meant, it threw light either an extra 50 feet or 50 yards. I'm not sure which, but it threw light further. Not up high, but it threw it further out. It was a higher intensity bulb. It was never used in production, but you might see some of those out there, and that's what it's for. But again, it was never used in production. So the 56 headlight is that. 56 and 57, basically. Okay, it's got a pebbled triangle. It's really pebbled, and the word sealed beam is at the bottom. And that's this. I have them up here. You can take a look at it. I'm not going to pass them around. It's a little too fragile. I don't want to take a chance on that. But this is it. Pebble triangle, seal beam at the bottom. Now, the one thing about these, the one thing to note is that 56, which is this one, and 57 were actually different bulbs. This is a 57. If you look, you can compare the two. On the left, the word sealed beam down at the bottom is 3/8 of an inch high. And on a 57, it's 1/4 of an inch high. And that's important. I guess it's important for judging, but I'm not sure what kind of deductions there are of anything. But if you want the right one, the 56 has a larger sealed beam. The next one, when finally the 4 headlight system came into being, the guide was embossed above the triangle. Only 2 years, 58 and 59. if you can see it right up here, you can run your finger, you can feel the word guide. It's raised above. It's debossed, I guess, or embossed, I guess. Okay, but the triangle was clear, not like in 56 and 57. Now, I can tell you that there's still some judging guides. I'm not sure which ones, but I get calls and people tell me this quite often, that some of the judging guides still say that the 58 through 67 bulbs have a pebble triangle, and they don't. They are clear. Now, here's a picture. It's hard to see, but if you come up and look at it later, look at these, you can see the difference. There is a definite pebble texture in the 57, and it really is as clear as this. This is not Steuben glass. I mean, so there may be some lines, some markings in it, but it is a clear triangle. So I think that those judging guides should be changed, should be corrected. In 60 to 67, the guide designation went to the bottom of the glass like it was in 56 and 57. And interestingly, and the triangle is clear, just like in the earlier bulbs. But between 60 and 67, that's the bulb. But what's interesting is this bulb that I have here, this is a new old stock. These are all pretty much new old stock bulbs. They're brand new. Just as an aside, the diffuser this is a 60 only bulb. This may be a little too much information, but the 60 only bulb, the diffuser was a half circle. The 61 and later, they changed the diffuser, and you can see it if you look inside of this bulb later. The diffuser was made into a full circle. I think it did a better job of diffusing the light, so it didn't come out like a laser beam. The next one, 68 through 71, the only difference is the triangle has vertical lines running through it. But basically, it's the same. It is the same bulb. 72 is another change. In 72, and there is evidence that for some very, very late 71s, I'm not sure when, not sure about it, but 72 was a one-year-only bulb. The T3, there's no longer a triangle in the middle, and the T3 is put down at the bottom in a different format. And then in 73 came power beams. They were used through 1979, I think. I think in 1979, they changed some of the bulbs, either the high beams or low beams, I'm not sure which, to halogens. And then halogens were used till the end of the C3, and then they became square later in the C4s. And I don't know enough about that to present that, so I'm going to leave it at that. Here's something that goes under the heading of too much information, subheading, who cares? But it's there. People ask me about this, and I can tell you, all these headlights were dated, every one of them, when they were new. And if you come up later and you can look, it's a little hard to see in these pictures, but all these headlights had either a black ink stamp. The very early ones had black ink stamps, and the later ones had orange ink stamps. Now, the ink stamp came off really easy because it's just that. It's ink, and you just touch it, and it just about wants to come off by itself. But I later, if you want to come up and look, I can show you here. Here's a 60, 67. Here's a good example on the back of this one. It's up at the top, and it's just an ink stamp. It doesn't have to be at the top, but, I mean, nobody cared. But they did inks. They put the number 4001 or 2, which meant a 1 is a 1 filament. 1 filament is a high beam. 4002 is a 2 filament, which is a high-low combination. And then they had the date code, and it says 12V on it. The date code is quite complicated. I don't know why it had to be, but if you can see on this right there, it says 35/7/27. Okay, the first digit is the month of production, 12 months. Now N was used for 11 and D for 12 because you couldn't put a 1 for 11 would be the same as the first year. So they decided to use a D for an N for the 11th month and D for the 12th month. The second digit is the production line that it was made on. There were 5 production lines, so it could be 1 through 5, basically. The third digit is the last digit of the year. Now, there were no duplications, basically, because whenever they went from one to the other, they changed the design. 8 and 9 wouldn't be confused with a 58-59 or a 68-69, because the triangles were different. So that wouldn't be confused. And the last digit is the day of the month. So in the orange example here, it's 35/7/27. So 3 is March, 5, the fifth production line, the 7 is 1967, and 27 is the day of the year. So that bulb was produced on March 27th of 1967 on the fifth production line. It's too, like I said, who cares? It's not judged, at least not yet. But, you never know. I mean, who knows what they're going to come up with. But, when this is mounted in the car, you really can't see it. But I thought, people ask about it, and so I thought perhaps you might be interested to see it. And you see that one there, it says 4002. That's a 2-volt, so I know that's a low beam, 2 filaments, the date, and it's a 12-volt bulb. But they still made 6 volts in this T3s. You could still buy 6-volt bulbs late on because there were still a lot of cars that used it, so the service replacement. They were ink stamped right across the front, 6-volt, when you bought them, so that you knew what you were getting. What happened to them later, you can never know. And then again, that example, I have a couple of examples of the black, which says guide, but these are not good examples. You can't really read it, but I just thought you could see it was in a circle. It was a little bit different. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about, reproductions. There are a couple of reproductions out there. I know of 2 different ones. We all know Electric Limited, and then there's one from China that I've been seeing online. Let's start with the one from Electric Limited. Is a really good bulb. It's modern technology inside. It's made by Wagner. So it's not made by Guide, but it's made by Wagner, who still makes these bulbs today. There are several small differences between the real one and the reproduction. The first thing is that every one of them in this lower corner, down here, right in this area right here, there's a tiny little DOT. When the guy first started this, he had a few runs of clear with no DOT. And of course, the federal government decided you can't do that. Every light bulb has to say DOT someplace on it, and it can't be an ink stamp, and it can't be on the outside. It has to be so you can never take it off, so it's on the inside. So anyway, it's really tiny. You really got to get up really close and personal to see it, but it's there. The other thing is the back, on Guide bulbs, you see it's really shiny, almost like chrome. The Wagner, their process, it's very pebbly, so it's not shiny. Does it matter? Not really. I think the standard deduction for a set of those is like 4 points. If you don't have the real, I'm not sure exactly. I think that's about right. So it really doesn't matter much. Is it 3 points? 3, okay, 3, whatever. So it's really insignificant. The lights are really good. They really shine very well, modern lights. I would say that when you have the T3s in your car, at night, when you're driving, you have to have the person who was sitting in your seat there go ahead, with a flashlight, in front of you, because they're just terrible. They always were. The other reproduction that I know of, I haven't seen it lately, but it was out for a while, is made in China. I'm not sure who does it. I don't know but the guy who was advertising them on eBay. It's for off-road use only, because it doesn't say DOT on it, and they have no diffuser, nothing inside, and it's like a laser beam coming out of there. And so they're out there, and they were inexpensive, and like everything coming from China, they probably just don't work. So that's really it. The last thing I wanted to talk about, just quickly, why do these light bulbs fail, and what happens when they fail? Some of these bulbs here are almost 70 years old, but they still work. If you put 12 volts on them, they'll light up and they'll do just fine. I don't know what'll happen tomorrow, but today they work. Well, what happens is, the reason they fail, basically, of course they can burn, the filament can burn out. We know that. They get dropped, whatever, they burn out. That's not the point. But they smoke up. These seals are put on here, and then the oxygen is drawn out of this little nipple. It's hard to see here, but this little glass nipple in the middle is where the argon is put in, and oxygen is drawn out in the process. If these seals around these terminals leak, oxygen gets in and the argon leaks out. If oxygen gets in, what happens to oxygen? It burns. And so what happens is, I can show you what happens here. This one will burn very slowly. I'll just put it on. It's a junker. It's just a small 12-volt bulb. And if you look inside here, you can see it's smoke. Smoke is starting to come out, burn up the oxygen. A better example is this one, which is a fast burn. This one really smoked up. There. Oh, you can see it in there. It's smoking. Now it just burned out. That's okay. Well, that's what happens. That's what happens. And that's okay. This is just a demo. I knew that was smoking. It smoked from the beginning, and it's a junker. But so that's what makes them fail. Now, when we buy them, or we sell them, I test them. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.